right. We are live. All right. Welcome, everybody. This is our Friday live show. We run this weekly every Friday at 7 p.m. Central. I'm your host, John Lawyer. My background is as a soldier. I spent years in Kuwait, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Now I'm a spiritual seeker as well as a coach and a guide at times. What we're trying to do is open the world up, have great spiritual discussions about philosophical topics, religious topics, and I feel like if we can all listen to each other, have better conversations, the world's just going to be a better place. And each week we feature a different co-host. I'm honored to introduce you to Birgitta Visser. She's a soul empowerment coach, light healer, and channels ancient masters. So throughout this live stream, we're going to have her website scrolling on the ticker, so check it out. And there's also going to be a link in the description for the permanent YouTube and podcast. So Birgitta, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey, John, thank you so much for having me on your show at 2 a.m. in the morning where I'm at.
It's late in Spain.
Yes, it is. It is. I kind of like neat matchsticks.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I am a what you call a soul empowerment coach, a light language healer, and a divine channel. So yes, I channel many of the ascended masters, and it's come very natural to me these days. But I've had to learn. It's like riding a bike. Like with everything in life, you've got to you when you fall down, you just get up and you continue and you keep trying. And then I still have one foot in the corporate world as well.
Okay.
So that's me in a nutshell. Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome to the show. And if any of the audience has questions for either of us, just post them in the channel, everybody. We'll try to get to them as we go through the show. Mm-hmm. And so I like to ask people when they come on the show, Birgitta, like when it comes to spirituality, it's so different for each person. And so like, what is it to you? Like, what would you tell people?
Gosh, aren't we all consciousness walking around in the human body, having human experiences? And like you said, spirituality means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. For me, it's all about becoming conscious of things and experiencing life. And I mean, not in the past, but in the past it was a little bit different, but it is really about becoming more conscious and elevating our consciousness and understanding the cogwheels of life. That's really what it's about for me. But it's also returning to a love for ourselves and each other, and walking one another back home, as I always say, to the light of ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really beautiful way to talk about spirituality. I think that would fit a lot of people's definitions. So thank you so much for sharing that. What sets you down this path that you're on today? How did you end up being a spiritualist?
Wow. Trauma.
Right.
Yeah, life experiences. That's what did it for me. And I think, many people go through suffering and pain throughout their lives. I mean, for me, it started in my youth. I was molested by a friend of the family. And I think I was like 10 or 11 years old. And growing up in the 80s was very different, than to what it is today. Not only that, I mean, I lost my dad when I was about 14 to coronary heart disease. And he refused to take his medication. And he hopped on his bicycle and took a last breath, and that was kind of it. And I always say he walked out of life because he was tired of life. Was it a form of suicide? I guess it was. He was only 44 years old, but my sister and I were teenagers, and I just turned 14, and it was just very surreal. I thought the next day, he'd just come walking back through that door, but of course that wasn't the case. And not only that, I mean, I was very skinny. I mean, I'm 5'11", and even at school I was very, very tall and lanky. and I was bullied at school. And even then, I would often throw my lunches away. And then at the dinner table, I would, eat my dinner. And I had this immense fear of boys at the time, and it was so ingrained within me. I just wanted to be invisible, totally invisible. And I mean, I didn't get any, as growing up as a kid. I mean, like I said, life was very different back then to what it is now, and I just kept everything kind of bottled up. And even when my mom put me on a modeling course, that didn't elevate that heaviness. Yeah, it wasn't like one day magically I got my self confidence back, my self worth, and just accepted myself the way I was. Oh my gosh, no way! I thought I was ugly. I've really felt like an ugly duckling, with knobbly knees and knobbly arms, and but yeah, so putting me on a modeling course just didn't work for me. And then when a hairdresser just picked me out for a show, they chopped off my hair that was till about my shoulders, chopped it, into a pixie cut. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I just wish I could grow my hair magically, but of course that didn't work. It took months, and I mean, even in the modeling industry, I mean, I traveled the world, but I could never live of it. I mean, if I I hardly made any money of it, but even there in New York, I was assaulted by a hairdresser, and I just kept that bottled up inside, because it would have been his word against mine, and yeah. So I mean, I bartended, I was hostessing, I did administrative work, and yeah. So not only that, but I also rolled into dysfunctional relationships, and that was only because I was very broken on the inside myself. So, what you vibe out is exactly what you reel back in. And the people you meet along your path, they're there to trigger you and to help you actually heal these wounds. But we don't often see it that way. Yeah, because we're all reflections of one another. We're all teachers of one another. And oh my gosh, I didn't see it at the time. I was really like, oh my God, why do these people make me so unhappy? What am I doing wrong here? But besides that, I even rolled into drugs for several months because my stepdad passed away in 2000, of cancer. And it was really, my mom was leaning on me emotionally. And I just feel I didn't have an outlet. And many people, and I am not the only one, many people wanted to see my happy face. And they were so used to that. It's like, well, the unhappy face was like, no, we can't have that. So I could talk about what happened to my stepdad for like a minute, and that was it. And then I thought, well, you know what I'm going to do? I am just going to fit in with the crowd. And for 3 months, I used it recreationally, but it kind of went too far because I had blackouts. And yeah, from one day to the next, I just stopped. But yeah, going back into these dysfunctional relationships, that's, I attracted them. And I always say, prior to being born, we choose these characters for our soul's growth. When we're right bang in the middle of it, it doesn't make sense. But once we're out of it, maybe 6 months down the line or years down the line, you look back and you think, do you know what? I'm grateful that you were a part of my life. And that is something that I had to learn, because with many, well, I didn't have many, but with the relationships that I was in, I couldn't understand what I did wrong. But what we often don't see is that when we're so broken, we attract other broken birds, and we try and fix them, we try to mold them to our own liking. But it's basically we run away from our own brokenness, and we project that onto someone else, and try to fix them. And it took many years to figure that one out. It really did. And I think in 2009 was a real turning point for me, where one of my turning points where I hit rock bottom, and where I was living in Holland. And my ex, he was from the States, and he was a real trigger for me. And at the time, he was dabbling in drugs, which I didn't know. And it got really, really, really bad fast. And, I tried to save him. And he did try to beat his demons, but, he didn't have a Dutch social. And then he was held for ransom by the Crips in Holland. And in short, I just helped save his life by helping out the police, and he was deported back to the US. But the leader of the Crips, he called me and he said, "If I ever find you," he's like, "I'm going to kill you." And he's like, "If I ever find your ex," he's like, "you'll never find him again. He'll be dead in the ditch somewhere." And that really shook me to my core. That really shook me to my core. And I'd already left Holland in the space of like several days. My mom had, boom, taken me out of Holland, and I'd rented a place in the UK, and I just downed a whole box of ibuprofens. Really lame attempt at my own life. And then the next day, I just woke up, and I decided. My mom actually said to me, she's like, "Birgitta, why don't you go and see a counselor?" And I did. I actually did. But the counselor was useless, absolutely useless. Because after the hour was up, she's like, she said to me, she's like, "Brigitte, you know what? You're going to be fine. You're strong enough. You'll manage." Great. And I left. And I thought, this is not helping me. I mean, I was so down in the dumps, really. And I had to figure it out. And so I found a Reiki practitioner. And as I always say, she was really my saving grace. And that was the start of my holistic journey. Actually, my ex is doing really well. He's turned his life around completely. It took him several more years, but he's doing very, very well. And so if he had not been in my life, that is a prime example, as I always say. If he had not been in my life, I would never have commenced walking that holistic path. And so, yeah, and that's the same for any interpersonal relationship. Rather than looking at it from, why is this person doing this to me? It's actually, hey, you know what? What is this experience teaching me? What is this person doing for me? And that's a whole different perspective to look at it. Yeah, rather than when we deflect, we actually reflect and reanalyze, reevaluate our lives.
Well, thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, I love and appreciate your vulnerability uh, through all that, and I think there's a common thread in a lot of people who have kind of found their spiritual footing. They've seen that trauma, they've seen some darkness that has kind of given them perspective for the light. I think it's really interesting that your experience kind of going down that path started with a Reiki practitioner, because that's kind of like a light worker, and I find that like really compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I studied many healing modalities from EFT, the emotional freedom technique, which I really like because it's powerful, it's very simple, and it's really tapping the emotions out of the experience so that, once that dials back to zero, it's like you can just talk about it without being triggered. Very simple, and it can work in the space of several minutes. But I also became like a meditation teacher. Studied that. I studied aromatherapy, aroma touch. Gosh, too many healing modalities to name, to be honest. I was like this SpongeBob because I really wanted to learn and understand more. But don't think that was the end of my experiences. Oh my God, no, no, no. The universe was like, oh, let's see, let's wrap, let's present her as someone else, different environment, different packaging, and let's see what she does. Well, without Phil, what did I do? The same thing. The same thing. But this was a little bit different. I mean, I was out in Florida, and this guy was a real trip. I look back at it now, and it, it was really for me to find out more about myself and to overcome and to become. But this guy moved from an hour away to like two doors down from me, refused to leave me alone, would just waltz into my home whenever he wanted because he refused to return the key. He had lost his mother, fell into depression, had a reckless, couldn't pay it, didn't even know there was a warrant out for his arrest at the time. I tried to help him as much as I could. Couldn't pay his bills. I paid the bills, a lot of his bills, got his food. But you know what? I mean, I was there and I was actually working 7 days a week, which is insane, right? And I had my own household as well. And at some stage, when somebody becomes that controlling and that possessive, I turned into my usual survival mode. And my survival mode was really about working like an idiot and starving myself because these were things that I could control, John. And working like crazy was keeping my emotions in check. Really, I was programmed that way, and that's how I could function, which is insane. And I remember putting my house up for sale, and this was a house that I really, really loved, but I just wanted to get away from him, and I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was suffocating and I sold my home and I was staying in a dodgy hotel in St. Pete Beach for a while. Because I felt like such a failure that I sold the home and I wanted to buy another home. And I did. And what happened as well with my ex there, he was evicted and he begged me. He said, Birgitta, can you please pay the deposit? He's like, I promise I'll pay you back. Sign the contract. Yeah, of course, I never saw that money again. But I remember buying the other house and it was a money pit. And gosh, the builders took me for a ride. One of them, I mean, the what do you call that? The main guy, the contractor, he was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And yes, I learned the hard way that I paid in installments, but I should have withheld the final installment, and I didn't. Boom, and he was gone. Stole all my tools in the garage. Broke into my place, stole everything, and yeah, my place was done for like 80%. So I had to finish it off with one other person, which took several months. I was shattered by that time. But the thing with this is that there were times where even in my other home, where I was feeling so exasperated, and I was screaming at the universe, saying, you know what, I cannot go on like this anymore. Oh my gosh, I would just be lying on the floor in the dark, screaming, and finally, it came in a little breadcrumb, and in the form of my sister. And she advised me that she'd done kambo, which is shamanic frog medicine. And I was at that point, I was like, you know what the heck? I'm just going to try something else. And truth be told, I didn't do too much research on it. And so I went. I found a practitioner and I went. And oh my goodness. And, I sitting across from the shaman, he asked me for an intent. And so we sat there, and when he burnt points in my skin, actually in my lower leg, 4 points, he then put the Amazonian monkey tree frog poison onto me. And what happened then was like, oh my gosh, and I had to drink 2 liters water. And it like rushed to my head so quickly. It was like poof. It was like this massive flu, and I was just purging. And of course, I had a bucket next to me, and I was running up and down the loo, and he was just helping me because it just came out everywhere, which is very normal for Kambo, because it's a very, very physical experience. And
Right.
it took me 4 hours, 4 hours. And he said, do you know why it took you that long? And I said, no. And he's like, because your ego is battling so hard to stay in the driver's seat, because you're so pre-programmed, you've been so conditioned and rigid in your ways, that it was just really tough for you to let go until I finally did. And that was a very life-changing experience for me, honestly, because and it wasn't, I mean, I went back. I was a sadomasochist and I went back, because there was a lot more that needed clearing. But what happened to me is like I became more clearer in my head, and I made a bucket list and stuck it on my fridge. And so I went skydiving because I have a fear of heights. I went hang gliding. I started running for charity because I promised my stepdad in 2000 that I was going to start running for, charity and cancer. Well, I never did. It remained a figment of my imagination for 16 years until I finally did. So it was a very powerful experience for me.
That's like the powerful story part two that you just told, after
Yeah.
part one. And one thing I love about this is that you had experienced the Reiki and you studied all these other modalities,
Yeah.
and yet even after that there was struggle, there was hardship,
Oh,
there was,
absolutely.
and I think that's so important because I think sometimes people think, oh, I'm on a spiritual path now, it's going to be okay, right? And
No,
then
no.
you know which can be true, but oftentimes there's still things we have to let go of, there's still things
Yes.
that we have to take care of, and I really appreciate your experience with the frogs. I've had some friends that have done ayahuasca and have some similar
Yeah.
stories to tell me, but especially about the ego, kind of your release from that, because our mind and our ego are so noisy and they're so ever
Yes.
present, and like you said, we're so pre-programmed to allow that noise to kind of obfuscate our perception of the universe,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it was, I think, what sent me over the edge really was the fact that I also wrote about this. It was, I mean, this guy had his studio was being tented, and he'd said, "Well, I can stay with Birgitta," to the landlord. I said, "Excuse me, you said what?" I said, "I do not want you and your two fat cats in my home." And so I had to book him a hotel, right? Yeah, I had to pay for it, plus for his two cats. And then he got, then when I think it was the day the tenting was supposed to be brought down, it wasn't brought down, and I just lost it. I lost it so completely. I picked him up, and he's like, "Yeah, but can I stay with you for a few hours?" I was screaming in the car so hard that because I didn't want that, and I was going through every red light, and I was speeding so hard. I just I'd had enough, completely, utterly enough. I to this day, John, I do not understand how a police did, how a cop didn't stop me, and and he knew he'd gone too far, too far. And it was really weird because after that he sort of left me alone. But also after that frog, that combo treatment, it was like the universe told me, there is a fair there for a First Unity Spiritualist Church, and I said, you gotta go, and I was like, no, and so I went out, and that's where I met my former mentor, Lania Starhawk, and she walked me through the Akashic records, so past lives. And it was very, very interesting because she did not know what happened to me. I'd lost a lot of weight prior to that because I literally couldn't stomach anything. And even when I was in the UK still working, I couldn't even down a cup of tea. That's how bad it was. And I became skin over bones. And so when she walked me through a past life with my ex in Florida, she said, "You lived sometime in like the Middle Ages," and I was pretty well off. And I think I had something to do with herbal medication because I always remember I was opening little drawers, and my ex at that point, in that lifetime, he was like a charlatan who waltzed into my life, and he slow poisoned me with an arsenic, and under the guise of saying that he was healing me. And
Wow.
so, and then I told her, I said, now it makes sense why I had these stomach issues. Because it's like a karmic residue that we take with us once we incarnate. And but what happened was the energy changed completely. And so it was like he left me alone. And for the time that I was still there, the couple of months that I was still there, I had a bit more peace and I could breathe a little bit more. But under her guidance, actually, I learned to channel. And that
So
was actually,
that's
yeah.
so that's where you learn to kind of channel this kind of ancient and cosmic wisdom.
Yes, yeah. Well, for me, it was all about self healing at the time because I just asked questions and it was very powerful for me. And it's not like, hey, you get the answer that you wish for. Oh, heck no, no, it's not like that. You get the answer that is needed for, again, your soul's evolution.
Right. And I like that term evolution of the soul because we're always growing, right? We're always
Yeah.
changing and we're always moving. So I,
Yes.
I appreciate that.
So I look back and I can only be grateful for him having been part of my life. I mean, I hated him for a while, but it's now I look back and it's like I'm grateful. And that's the one thing, because I work a lot with the Ascended Master Saint Germain, and he's always said, be grateful for everyone that's been a part of your life and has been a part of your journey.
Yeah, we talk a lot about on our channel about the fact that the journey really is everything, right? It's not the destination where we very rarely get to where we think we're going to get to. We very
Yes.
rarely, it's never we never get to the bullseye, right? It's always our journey to the target that is kind of the point. So yeah, it's about appreciating the process along the way. If we can learn to appreciate that, I feel like that's most of the battle of trying to figure out like peace and calm in our life.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it doesn't, it takes us many, many experiences.
Okay. In your book, I've been reading your book. I'm not through it all the way yet, but I do really enjoy it.
Yeah.
You talk a lot about conditioning, and you talk about the fact that we're kind of being conditioned by society, which I'm very interested in. So if you could kind
Yeah.
of talk about that a little bit, I'm interested in what you had to say about it.
Yeah. We are taught to live a certain way, to be a certain way. We live in this we live in this matrix, if you like, this paradigm. I always say we live in this because Earth is Terra. Yeah, so Terra, we live in this terrarium and we live in this little glass box. We're like this, humans are like this little experiment. And it's like, ooh, let's see what we can do now. Let's see how we can exercise our control now. And let's see what these little humans in this glass box will do. And that's how I see it. I mean, I've stepped out of that a long time ago,
Sure.
but it's like I said, we are taught to be a certain way and to live a certain way, and that's society, according to the norm of society, and that's a lot of garbage. You have
Yeah.
to be in tune with yourself. You have to be aligned within yourself. And that's why so many people suffer from dis-ease and their soul is just not vibing very happy within their body. It's not aligned. And I mean, let's not even get into like social media. I mean, that's a big, it has a positive, but it also has a negative. Um, you get all these products thrown at you, this consumerism. Not only that, but it's people are just so absorbed in this what I call a technocratic society. It's like you hop on the train. I mean, I remember this in the UK. You hop on the train and it's like nobody looks at one another. Everyone's so engrossed, on their phones, scrolling, or on their laptops or their Kindles, you name it, whatever tablets. Whereas, if you compare that to like the 1980s, for instance, we didn't have any of that. We even had a landline, and we played outside with our friends, and people would just visit one another for coffee. And I always say it was far more of a heart-based life than this self-centered life. That's how I see it. But I've hopped out of that bubble, and yeah, I always say to people, never live your life according to the tune of another, but rather live it according to the song and dance of your own heart. Because it doesn't matter what people think of you. Really, it doesn't. It matters what you think of you and how you feel about yourself. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's far more important.
Yeah. So it's really you're when you're walking to the beat of your own drum, you're writing your own story instead of living someone else's story that's being written for you. That's not
Yep.
in line with what you're meant to be. And I agree. I think that our technological society that we live in, I think there's tons of benefits to it. I mean, the fact that you and I can be sitting here having a conversation is pretty amazing.
Yes.
But at the same time, it really is this magnetic pull in social media, in technology, and we have a choice about how we interact with it. We have a
Yep.
choice about how we process through it and how we use it and how we choose to live within it and around it. And so, when you talk about the conditioning that we receive from society, and I mean, sometimes I call it the stream of unconsciousness that people just want us to be in and get pulled
Yeah.
down the stream and just
Hmm.
be on that conveyor belt, right? What do you
Yes.
rec? Yeah, what do you recommend for people to be able to kind of take a step back and become aware and kind of step out of that conditioning?
Yeah. So when we talk, switch off.
Right.
That's a first, switch off. What happens when we switch off? What happens when when we talk about the technology? Ooh, what happens when we do a day without? Because people can't do that anymore. What happens
Right.
when we do that? For me, it's very easy. I mean, I got rid of my TV many years ago. I don't really care for it. Television means for me tells a vision, right? It tells a vision. It programs you as well. Yeah, you allow
Yeah.
whatever goes on, whether you watch the news. For me, that's a complete illusion. Uh, and that's one of the things. There is so much division going on. People are very divisive these days.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
but this is being said, and this is being said, and I think, oh my God, you're really falling for it because that's exactly what it's all about. Yes, that's right, divide and conquer.
Yes. Yeah.
The more
Absolutely.
division there is, the easier it is to like control the people. But really, just try and switch off and see what happens.
Yeah, I love that. I think one of the things that I've seen as far as that division goes, I
Mm,
think when I had kind of my awakening moment, I got out of politics completely.
yeah.
I stopped being interested in social justice. I still believe in justice for people, but I really focused on essentially just what do we have in common? What unites us?
Yes.
What what if I go to my neighbor and we agree on 90% of things, why am I going to get upset about the 10% that we don't agree on? Why am I going to get so upset about that? And I was reading this forum the other day, and it was a bunch of teachers, and they were talking about their students. And this one group of teachers they take their students on a trip every year, and they have to leave their cell phones behind. And it's like a multi-day trip. And when the students get back, they report that one of their favorite things about the field trip was the fact that they were away from their devices and they connected with each other, they connected with nature, and that's one of their favorite things about it. And yet, when they go home,
Yeah.
they immediately pick it back up and get right back to it. So I think it's a really interesting study in that people know, I think even children know, oh, I can do better if I'm not around this thing, but they can't separate themselves from it.
No.
It's like a this pull that is this magnet for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because when I was out in India, and this was in 2009, I I did the advanced course, and that was a course of silence. No phones, nothing, just silence and being with your own thoughts and doing service. So for me, service was, sweeping the floors. And even I remember this kid running through everything that I'd swept up, but I couldn't say anything, could not say anything. But being in silence for several days and also meditating, it was so, so powerful because hearing your voice after a few days just sounded really strange. But being with your
Yeah,
own thoughts, you do so much, it's kind of like it was a lot of self reflection for many of those that were on that course.
right. Yeah, my experience with meditation, and silence, you start to hear things not just with your ears, but with all your senses, the things that you see, the things that you feel, the
Yep.
perception that you have from all of your senses, including that sixth sense, that universal sense. You become connected with things that you didn't even know existed, and you start to sense things that you had never realized was there.
Yep. And I forgot to mention as well, when we talk about the ego, I always say the ego means, to eject God out. And people
Yes.
are like, yeah, but what do you mean? Because what happens is we eject source. So we're not plugged into source. We're not plugged into the universal consciousness. We've separated ourselves, and that is the ego. Does the ego serve us? Sure, it does. It does help us through that feat of duality, you
Sure.
know.
Absolutely.
And that's why I say, we live in a world of comparisons or comparables. We compare to one another, and we shouldn't really be doing that. Why? Nobody's better than the other. I'm not better than
Right.
anyone else.
Right.
We're all on our own journeys, and we vibe at different levels of consciousness, which is fine.
Yeah.
Because if we didn't, oh, sorry, yeah, if
No,
we
no.
didn't, then how could we ever progress? How could we ever develop?
Exactly. That develop, progress, and I really love that when you call ego an acronym and ejecting God out, because I mean, and you say that, and you quantify that with the ego has a use. I mean, it's kept us alive for thousands of years. It's
Yes.
good at what it does, but it overperforms, right? It's
Yeah.
it completely overperforms, and so for our audience out there, I think it's good for them to understand that, okay, my ego is giving me useful information, but if I can just quiet, sit it over here, then that's that term that spiritualists talk about, ego death. And when spiritualists talk about ego death, they're not, I've never really thought they're talking about killing the ego. It's just that over centuries, spiritual teachers have said kill the ego because it's just a metaphor to setting it on its side in the corner and quieting it, so that you can then, like you said, connect to source, the
Yeah.
universal language of everything that we're connected to.
Yeah, I always give this analogy of, it's like the ego sitting in the driver's seat, and the mind is like, and the mind and the ego are having conversations because the mind ingests everything, everything that it sees and hears, and the
Yeah.
ego becomes more boisterous. And where's the soul? Oh well, they locked it up in the trunk, and the soul is going, help me, I
Yeah.
want to get out,
Yeah.
and and it's like, well, the ego and the mind are having a good time, and they're, kind of like, I always say they're having a ball of a time until the mind suddenly realizes, well, hey, wait a minute, what am I doing, and why is the ego in the driver's seat? Gets up, and opens the trunk, gets the soul out. And I always say this, it's like the ego and the soul and the mind just need to have a conversation. And it's all about absorbing the ego, I mean, that egocentric version of ourselves within our soul, within the loving embrace of our soul. And that's really what it is. And when you kind of do that, and that these are life experiences, but when you do that, you come to a very different place because you don't let things affect you as much anymore. It's not like you huff and puff like the big bad wolf, like the ego would do. It's just like, well, I come to a place of acceptance and people are just the way that they are. And what's the
Right.
point to become hot and bothered about it?
Yeah. You've talked about the fact that we're always judging ourselves. You kind of alluded to
We
that
do.
earlier,
Yeah.
and we're always judging others and comparing ourselves to others, and that's judgment.
Yeah.
And and when we stop doing that, we spend so much time doing that that
We do.
when you release that, the amount of bandwidth that you've opened up for yourself is just massive to be able to be calm, to be peaceful, and to also sense other things like we were talking about.
Yeah.
Because that two-way kind of avenue of judgment is just constant.
Yep. It is always, always. And
And
that's the thing
and when
that
you
gets us
stop,
down.
yeah, and when you stop that, it really is a universal experience because you're like, oh my God, I have so much. There's so much more to life in me than all these judgments I have of myself and of others.
Yeah.
So
And, for me, I mean, going back in last year was a tough year for me because I was working, yeah, this is a good one. I was working like crazy again. I had two roles within the company. And I just kept going because I felt like I had this responsibility. But at the end of the day, John, if you get, God forbid, if you get hit by a bus or a truck, right, you'll be replaced in the space of what, 2 or 3 weeks? Because you're just a number. And it's just like, well, why do we do that with ourselves? Why do we live in that rat race of life? Is that what, if that what gives your, fine if it gives your soul purpose, if that's what you feel gives you purpose. But actually, for me, it didn't. It was really like, what am I doing with my life? I was out of breath. I'd lost like 8 kilograms. I put myself in the boxing ring just because I thought, it's important to get the work done. I have this responsibility. Well, actually, I should have that responsibility towards myself, not just a job. And the thing is, these days, is that, many people work from home, myself included, but it's like your wages are like the drug. I call it, your wages are like the drug that keeps you hooked on being on on working for a certain company, organization, or your employer, because we have to pay our bills in order to stay afloat. But what happens if you turn that around and you're like, actually, what is it that I love doing? What is my passion? And you turn that around, and that is what you start to focus on. And even trust me, even though I still have one role within the company, I am much more balanced now. But it's really for me. For me, it's now about transitioning out at some point, and
right.
just doing my spiritual work. But it's like I said, we keep experiencing life, and it will keep showing up in ways you may not expect, but it's all there to teach you.
Yeah, I think it's really healthy to kind of honor that human side of us that we have to like take care of, and it's part of who we are, and like we have
Yeah,
to move through this real world because most of us aren't going to live in a monastery in the foothills of the Himalayas, right? We're going
true.
to
And
be here.
yeah, and the truth is, as long as you are conscious of what you're doing, because I was very conscious of it. Yeah, that's the main thing. So I wasn't, I wasn't necessarily running on autopilot as I used to, because I was conscious of what I was doing to myself. But it was a matter of, what am I going to do about it? How am I going to resolve this? And even for me, like the UK was soul destroying for me. I had to get out. And it was really that nudge that I needed from the universe saying, Brigitta, it's now time to get out. It's not only that, I mean, the UK quadrupled with everything in pricing. It was insane. And so I had it out to Spain. And yeah, I've been here since last year, and it's been a healing journey for me as well.
Well, that sounds like universal intuition, right? And that we
Yeah.
listen to it. Like when the
Yes.
universe is telling us something, if we don't listen to it, then things kind of can go quite awry.
Oh, absolutely. And then people say, yeah, but the grass is not always greener on the other side. Well, no, but there is a difference
Yeah,
because I followed my inner compass north this time around.
right.
And I'm glad I
Well,
did. I'm glad I did.
yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned earlier, I've been reading your book,
Yep.
Becoming Authentically Me, and it has been a great read so far. And I was wondering if you could just kind of tell us about when you think about your book, what would you like to tell people?
Ooh, what's it about? Um, Gosh, that was a process. I mean, that book took me about 20 years to write. That was my first book. So, yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about it's in two parts. So the first part is really about the shifting consciousness,
Right,
about the transformational times we find ourselves in. A lot of that is channeled. I talk about the Anunnaki. I talk about Atlantis, about Lemuria. I talk about the whole COVID debacle, about the fact that there is no death, really, because we never die. We're energy. We keep transforming and we keep evolving because that's what we are. We're consciousness.
right,
And yeah, so that's the first part of my book, really. And I also actually, there is one thing, and you may have come across it. I call the Garden of Eden, where Eden is an acronym, and it actually means, oh, gosh, my gosh, I had it in my head. Earth Development Exploration Network. That's
right.
how it was given to me, and I was like, "Oh my God, that's amazing!" It's not like like a literal garden,
Sure.
but like I said, that whole Middle Eastern region from Iraq all the way to Turkey.
Right.
That's what I call where the Garden of Eden was situated. So I do talk about that as well. But the second part of my book is all about my life and everything that I've overcome. I mean, I talk about depression, I talk about addiction, I talk about mental health as well. I talk about the people that I've lost, and it's all infused with the many humorous channeled messages from the many masters. And they always say, you know what? Take life with a pinch of salt. You people are all so serious when things happen to you. And it's just like, it's just an experience. Life is an experiment to experience. And don't get so bogged down with everything that you go through. I mean, it may seem huge when you're right in the middle of it, but it's just an experience. That's it. Yeah. So don't remain in that victimhood, but
Right.
rather just get up, do the work, do the inner work, and heal. And you cannot escape your own inner demons. It's really about walking through the dark night of soul. Oh, and I've walked it time and again. I always say I burnt my butt to a crisp time and time again. But would I have my life any other way? No. No, because I wouldn't be who I am today.
Yeah, I feel the same way that I wouldn't go back and change anything in my past, even though some of it was very difficult, right?
Yeah.
And navigating through that is tremendously powerful. It's a really vivid description. Like I said, it's a really good book. I encourage everybody to get a copy and read it. In the introduction, you talk about, and you've talked about it several times today as well. You've talked about reflection, and
Yeah.
I'm always fascinated with reflection because whether you're reading the Sufi poets and Rumi or you're reading other religious traditions, we come up with mirrors and reflections in spirituality and religion
Yeah.
and philosophy quite a bit. And you said that people should look at themselves in the mirror and say, "I love you," and I really love that because I have great faith and deep respect for the power of the spoken or verbal word, and
Yeah.
affirmations. So, can you talk about why that's so important?
Oh, that's yeah, my my dad, and my sister and I were kids, he would say, "Look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, I love you." It's like, what? But even now I can say to myself, in the mirror, I love you. But for the longest time, that was very hard for me because, we look at ourselves so in such a distorted way. It's like I compare that to the laughing hall of mirrors because that's how we see ourselves, completely distorted, whereas we're all beautiful, beautiful souls encapsulated within a human body, having these human experiences. And yeah, so that to me is really that reflection. But another thing about that is when people keep pointing fingers, and I would say, I would hold a mirror. If I were to hold a mirror up to them, it's like, well, actually, you're pointing fingers at yourself, aren't you? So, what are you going to do about it? It's about taking that responsibility for our lives and that accountability, because nobody else has to do the work but you.
Right. Yeah, that's so true that we're the only ones that can do the work for ourselves. No one else
Yeah.
can change us. We have to change
No,
ourselves. And again, like you said earlier, when we're having problems with other people, when we're having judgments as other, it's often a reflection of ourselves. It usually is a
it is.
reflection
It
of
is, and
ourselves,
that's
right?
that's a beautiful trigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there is something within you that's requesting to be healed, but we don't see it that way. We don't see it that way, but it is. And rather than what I always say, playing whack-a-mole with our emotions, it's like, hey, look at that part of yourself. Look at that trigger and understand what it is wanting from you, and yeah, reevaluate that and heal.
Yeah, heal. And healing, I think one of the things that you talk about in your book, in this journey of healing, in your book, in the introduction, you actually say, I'm going to repeat myself throughout this book some. And so I want to let you
Yes.
know right now that's going to happen. And I love that, right? Because I feel like spiritual teachers are always repeating themselves,
Yeah.
but it's so important.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, um,
And
what,
the other thing that besides that, returning to that love for ourselves, is cultivating that joy within.
yeah, I think that when it comes to like, what do you want out of life? What do you want out of the universe?
Yep.
I think being joyous should be at the top of a lot of our
No,
lists, right?
absolutely,
Like
absolutely.
we should be having fun, and even in dark times, even when you're having problems, you can still have fun. You can still find the positivity and the joy in it. And you one of the themes I'm hearing from you throughout this is self love, and
Yep.
we talk about this on the show. I think probably every time we have someone on, which is good, because it's so important. And
Yes.
it's I think it keeps coming up for me when I talk to other people in the spiritual field, in the spiritual realm, because our society doesn't teach us to it. So I think we
No, it
have to keep
doesn't.
saying it. We have to repeat it because it really is about loving yourself first, completely, 100% before you do
Yes.
anything else. And it sounds okay, I get that, but to actually go do it is I don't think it's easy, especially given our
Yep.
conditioning that we talked about earlier.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But self-love is a necessity. You cannot pour from an empty cup. That's
Right.
impossible. And it took me a long time to figure that one out. That's why I, and I was a doormat for everyone because I wanted to make everyone happy. Yeah, that's
Okay.
not self-love.
No.
That is that fear of being hurt. I had an immense fear of being hurt. I had this immense fear of what other people thought of me.
Right.
So I had to live a certain way. Well, that didn't work out very well for me, did it? So eventually, that I really had to nurture my own soul, which is really important. Working on that relationship with the relationship with yourself is so important because once you heal from the pain you've kept within, and I call that, we keep the pain in quantum physics. We keep the pain in our mind. I call it the archives of the mind, but it's the little hypothalamus, that the little mini factory within our brains, and we store a lot of our unhealed experiences there. But we also store the joy there. But when something happens, it's like, oh, or we meet someone and we go into, doesn't matter, for instance, very black or white, we go into a relationship and it's like, oh no, but there's an unhealed experience there. It's like, no, it's like, ooh, it's like this archive opens, it's like, and the trigger comes out. And it's like, we still act a certain way when we are in another relationship because we haven't healed from that trigger. And that's why we pile a whole lot of junk up there and we keep it there. And when we start sifting through that and healing the wounds within our mind that have kept bleeding into our environment, our world becomes completely different because we have to heal from the inside out, not the outside in, the
Yeah.
inside out.
Yeah, and you talked earlier about kind of that alignment of mind, body, and soul,
Yeah.
and the fact that when you look at things from a spiritual perspective, it's not just that. It's our body, our mind, it's our
Yes.
spirit, and it's reprogramming all of that
Yep.
into the way that makes the most sense for you, that takes you to the place that you need to go. And that's not always easy. It takes time, and it takes repetition, and it takes
Yes.
falling down and getting back up, right?
It's unlearning everything that you have learned.
Yeah.
It's unbecoming to become.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's addition by subtraction, and then you get to add to yourself after that.
Yes.
And yeah, it's a big thing, I think, and that we can replace these things that we subtract with great things, with things that we
Yeah.
need,
Yeah.
and things that vibe with us.
Yep. Absolutely. And it's basically a shift in consciousness. That's what it is. It's one of
Yeah.
these things that I got asked a lot, by the way. Yeah, but what does it mean? Shift it. What does it mean going from 3D to 5D? Well, it's very simple. A shift in consciousness. That's what it's about. And it's like, yeah, but isn't somebody going to save us? What's happening with the world? Well, you're here to save yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're here to heal yourself and inspire others. And again, you can wait for a savior until you're blue in the face. But it's really, the work starts with ourselves. And
Right.
that's that shift in consciousness, going from that 3D. Many people have already shifted from that material, the very masculine, to that more 5D, and that more shifting that consciousness, doing the healing work, and being far more in tune with themselves. And when I say in tune with themselves, it's the masculine and the feminine in balance. Whereas the masculine is important, it's all about the doing, and I would say go, 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 but it's in balance with the feminine. It's about nourishing our spirit and
Yeah.
nurturing our own soul.
Yeah. I completely resonate with that. I mean, that's why we named our community in Kishar after this Sumerian goddess of Mother Earth.
Yeah.
So, if when people go out and they say to themselves, "Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to kind of walk this spiritual path. I'm going to have spiritual growth. I'm going to be aligned in mind, body, and soul. I'm going to work on that." I always think that it's really important that people kind of be grounded and centered in their day-to-day lives and their reality.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what grounds you? What centers you in your everyday?
So I'm going to hit that question back at you. What does that do for you?
I like
Before
that.
I give my
No,
view.
yeah, no, you're a co-host, so I love that. For me, I for me, being grounded and centered is having kind of an organized space around me that helps. It helps when I breathe right, because I think breathing is really that connection to the beyond. And so if I can breathe easy, even if it's just like as I go throughout my day and I'm not stressed, I don't have anxiety, and I can take deep, full breaths, that's a huge start. I think having being some intentional movement where I'm moving my body every day in some way, regardless of what that is. I don't do that as much as I should, but I'm work in progress.
It's okay.
I think eating well
Yeah.
and eating, and I think that is so personal, because I think diet is very unique to each person. So I think whatever works best for a person, eat
Yeah.
that. And I think that's a huge base. Sleeping right. I think sleeping well. I think these practical things, and then
Yeah.
there's the more esoteric stuff. Like, I try to meditate every day, or at least have some reflection. I have some intentional meditations. I do bathing meditations twice a week, bathtub, candles, like
Nice.
chill.
Yep.
So it's stuff like that. Just stuff that keeps me within myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I like
So
that. I
yeah,
like that. Very practical, very practical. I mean, I like to meditate as well, 20 minutes a day. And for those people that are listening, right? If you're like, yeah, but I can't meditate. Yes, you can. You can. It's all about going back to the breath. And I like to listen to David G. So David and then J.I. on YouTube. And he does these 20-minute meditations, eradicating fear, anxiety, setting an intent to the universe. He's got so many different ones.
yeah,
Very, very powerful. And because it's a guided meditation and he does a mantra, you just follow it through and
yeah,
you just listen to it. And the more you do it, it's, when you start, you just start your day off right. And I don't like clutter around me. So I like to be able to breathe in my own home.
yeah.
I don't really care about the material. Yes. But it's really weird, especially, I mean, I've had so many downloads the last couple of weeks. It's been intense. And my diet's been changing as well. So it's really weird. Like I used to love like chocolate, can't even eat it anymore. I just can't. So there's a lot of shifts even happening within me. But there's another exercise that I really, really like. I mean, I go to the gym as well, so I like to work out. But one exercise is grounding. Now, you can go and ground yourself, with your bare feet,
Sure.
in Mother Earth, go to the sea, whatever. But there's one little exercise, and it takes like a minute to do, and it's really, really powerful, to ground ourselves so that we're right here in the moment and present in our own body because we're not. Yeah, too many people are either in the future or in the past rather than being in the present moment in your body and creating from this point on. Yeah, that is so important because that is where you hold your power.
Yeah.
And it's really just closing your eyes and envisioning that you are sitting, as I always say, sitting on a couch behind your eyes. Yeah, because that way your thoughts, you don't get muddled within your thoughts. And when you envision that, you just take like a couple of deep breaths in, and then you go all the way down to the base of your spine where your root chakra is located. And you imagine roots growing, or a beam of light, going all the way through the layers and layers of the earth until you get to the core. And the core of the earth, I envision as a big crystal, a big luminous energetic crystal. And you wrap either the roots around it or the light beam around it. And you take that energy from the core of Mother Earth, and you go back up either through the roots or that beam of light, and you allow for that energy to go through your whole body, and you feel that going through your whole body and into your auric field. And once you feel that, you are grounded and you are very, very present within your body and in this moment.
No, that's a good meditation in and of
Yeah.
itself, I think.
Oh, it is. It's very, very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting you talk about grounding and like literal grounding. My sister's been talking to me about that. She's been doing it, and
Mm.
I've been doing it a little bit. And there's definitely something to just touching the earth and being a part of it and sensing
Yeah.
that root chakra. I like that. I'm a big fan of the chakras and
Yeah. And you can do this anywhere. It doesn't matter. Even if you're in the post office, in the supermarket, you can do it. And once you start doing it, it will take you, it's like an on and off switch. Once you get
Yeah.
used to it, it's like an on and off switch, but it's powerful. And I think people live too much either in the past or in the future, and then it becomes murky when you are trying to create. And when we talk about manifestation, it's really about envisioning that you're already there, that you've already achieved that, or whatever you're trying to manifest, and then just taking the steps to reaching that goal.
Right.
Because we're
No.
energy.
Yeah, we're energy, and what we're putting out into the universe. Obviously, we're going to attract back to ourselves, and
Yeah.
we know that just by walking down the street. If we put out positive energy, we generally receive that back from people. So we actually can test it out just walking down a street or walking into a room with positive energy. We'll generally receive
Yep.
positive energy back. So you can actually test it
Yes.
and see that it actually works. And then if you live that way and you're focused on how you're putting yourself out to the universe, then what you receive back is going to be, pretty amazing. The universe sends us what we ask for.
Absolutely. And
And
that's, about the universe, by the way, I always say the universe is our dance partner. And yet, what do? We kick our dance partner blue in the shins.
yeah,
Yeah. Because
yeah,
we are, the universe is trying to flow with us, but we're not in the flow with the universe.
yeah. I love when you talk about that because for me, I always talk a lot in my YouTube videos about moving with the rhythm of the universe. So we're speaking the same language here because the universe has changed, and I don't believe in absolutes. I don't believe in constants, but that
No.
probably is the only constant, right? Change, the motion, the rhythm of the
Yes.
universe. That is the constant. Especially if you kind of understand the duality of the universe. And people have different views on it because I believe the non-dual nature of like this pantheistic oneness of us all. But I believe
Hmm.
that within this human self, right, where this like there's this dualistic fight between light and dark, and we're that balance that kind of walks the middle, and we get to choose where we put our energy, right? So
Yep.
I think that's a powerful way to kind of move through our reality.
Yep. I always say with our experiences, well, that's what I was told. There's no right or wrong in how you decide to experience life.
Yeah,
You grow at your own rate. It's okay. It doesn't matter. And
yeah,
when you fall down,
absolutely.
does it matter? No. Do I fall down? Do I take a tumble? Sure, I do. I'm not perfect. I'm still a work in progress.
Yeah, work in progress, and that's okay. That's a good thing.
Yes.
So there's there's probably a couple dozen more things that I could probably ask you, but is there
Yeah.
anything that we haven't talked about yet that you really want to kind of put out to the audience, like any messages or anything?
I don't know. Do you want a light language demo?
Sure, go for it.
Okay.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I mean, light language too. I mean, some people are like, hey, what's light language? Well, it's I always say it's a very powerful form of healing because it speaks directly to the soul. It's the cosmic language of love, so to speak. And on a conscious level, your mind is not going to understand. It's like, what? What? But on a soul level, your soul actually understands these codes just beautifully. And I am so humbled to be able to do that. It took me forever to spit it out, so to speak, because I was too afraid, and it had to do with a past life in Lemuria. But I found a teacher, and she's a friend of mine as well. And I said to her, I said, "You're going to kick me off that cliff, because I know I'm ready." And so I had a face to face with her, and she really kicked me off that cliff. And then it just started. She did the attunements, and then it just started to flow. And yeah, I absolutely love doing it. But yes, so is there an intent you want to focus on?
I will leave that up to you. I trust you.
Well, okay, fine. Yes. So the first thing that I got actually is peace.
Okay.
And I think once we are at peace with ourselves, we get a lot more clarity.
I completely agree with that.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and just take a very deep breath in, hold it, and gently let that go. And just take two more very, very deep breaths in and release it. And as I bring through the light codes, it's just allow for them to be absorbed, as I always say, in your whole being. So we're focusing on peace and clarity. Okay. Tiki anu si alu ka nu ni ke la weke tai miti se ke anu ko ya waka nu iti ti pakata tati siki ya makata ai wala ka kere no hala siki te malaku ni ki ya siki ya malaku shiki tiki ya maku ya tiki ya waha te ni ki ya nu ki ya kata tata siki ya malu ha tu e mahinu te siki ya mahani pe wahita kata ta ku Ta tu tu kusi ya mahan kita ke ka nuke atai wa hela wala ki kan ku an han ki pikata te si hadi kuwe wa ke mahai nu ki si ya mahai nu e he ne ko e wa han ki ya wa ha u he wa ha nu e ki si ya ma u ta mu e te ki ya manu ka nu ku unu e ha si ki ya sa wa he wa ha and gently feel that they're saying like drifting on the clouds, and allow for this to flow through your whole body just very, very gently. Muki asalo e kiki mala no kukun ki nka anweseke o nu wisiki titai. Tale wala kiniki amaka nuko si. Tawe wa muki isiki amaku. Talo e hita kita miki ki nuka tai di siki o pua he. Pani we a he wa ha ha ha. And just let the troubles of the day go. Tuki ki ama kuki ki ama siki ama u a. And allow for your energy field to be cleansed and to be clear, to be translucent and to be transparent. Si amalu ya naki itiki makue wa siki ama hoe wa hai wa ki. Tuki amakai wa he ama hai wa ki I. And forget not to bow at your own feet with gratitude. Sakai miki iniki awaka. Tu e nikisi kakanu ikiki ama uki ama. Tika no miki si wa ha niki wa ha. And they're saying, be easy on yourself. Thank you. Whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. It's amazing. I'm always amazed at the energy that you can feel across like continents and electrons. You know, it's pretty amazing stuff.
Yep, energy, right?
That's all energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I work a lot. These were a lot of the Star Walker. I work with many, but these were the Star Walker people, and I call them the Star Walker people because they are ancient. You know, ancient. You can call them Native Americans, but actually they're more from the South Americas.
Right.
So that's why I call them Star Walker people.
Okay. Yeah, like from going way back.
Yes, way back.
Way back.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, and every time I do a light language healing, it calms me right down as well. Sometimes it give me a high, but now I'm really calm.
Yeah, it is calming. It is centering and grounding too. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So, you know, throughout this episode, we've had your link to your website scrolling. So I absolutely encourage everyone to go check it out and get in contact with you. Check out your book. It's you're an amazing person. Your book has great advice in it. Is there anywhere else that you would like to direct people to?
There's a few things. Well, I mean, yes, my website, which is up there. I am also on YouTube under Power Soul Healing. Um, and I've got my Instagram, but my Instagram is messed up right now, which is under Universal Light Warriors. And I have my collaboration book that's out, Become Empowered. I have another collaboration book coming out in August, and then my second solo work is coming out in September, which is Child of the Sun, En route to enlightenment in India.
That sounds fun.
Yo, it's a totally different. It's not a big book, probably about 200 pages, and I talk about my journey at the Art of Living Center in Bangalore.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's all about the breath and meditation. And you touched on the meditation part as well, which the breath work is so
Right.
important because
Absolutely.
we shallow breathe. Yeah.
We do.
When
We
we
do
shallow
shallow breathe.
breathe, yeah. And that's why we live within the shallowness of ourselves. We live on the surface of ourselves. So when we start to breathe deep, that's when we start to resonate far more deeply within. Yeah, we connect on a much deeper level.
Yeah, and I mean, if you breathe, and there's some breathing that is so deep that when you get into it, you can even. I mean, we have DMT in our brain, right? And
Yeah.
we can actually access the universe through that breath work and DMT in our head.
Absolutely. You reach that zero point.
Yeah.
I love reaching that zero point. It's like one of my guides is Confucius, the ancient philosopher. And it's like he says to me, sit in the hole of nothingness. Yeah. In that stillness of yourself. And I thought that hole of nothingness, that is just so powerful
Yeah. It
because
is.
we're everything and nothing at the same time. We really are.
Yeah, and space is everything, right? Like whether it's space like out in the cosmic sense or the space of an atom in an atom, right, is like almost infinite.
Yep.
That's pretty cool.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I talk about that, and I channel a lot of the Indian deities like Krishna, Ganesh, Hanuman, Kali, but I also talk about depression, and somebody else that was on the course that committed suicide. I talk about the Indian culture, the nadi leaves because they were trying to find my nadi leaf. Remember this was in 2000 and 2000, that was 2008. They tried to find it, couldn't find it. But hey ho, what if they had found my nadi leaf and they could predict my future? Um, what would I have been spared all the trauma, the remaining trauma? So I'm glad they didn't find it. But it holds. I mean, apparently it rings true for many people that have had their nadi leaves read. Um, so I met Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, beautiful, beautiful human, and he is the founder of the Art of Living and a humanitarian as well. So it's a very, very different kind of book, but it's a lot of fun. And again, I do take the Mickey out of myself and out of my experiences because I'm not very serious about that anymore. Not like I used to be.
Sure.
Yeah.
Life's too important to be taken seriously, Oscar said,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah. I totally resonate with that. Well, I wanted to thank everybody for watching the show tonight. We're going to be around next Friday at 7. We have a guest co-host. It's going to be Jessie Torres. She's going to be talking about peak performance and life strategy and probably some interesting takes on spirituality. Birgitta, I wanted to thank you again so much for co-hosting and being a guest tonight, and thank you so much for being a good sport and staying up late in Spain. So thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No, no, thank you, John. Thank you so much for having me. And
Okay.
there's one thing that I will say for anybody that's out there and that's just in pain or suffering, you know, reach out to someone because that's really, really important. And my dad always used to say one thing, John, it's there's always light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how dark it may be.
I I have lived that message myself, and I
Yep.
I totally resonate with that. and repeat it to people as well. That's
Yep.
absolutely the best advice. And if you'll just stick around for a minute, we're going to
Yep.
get the live ended here, and we'll hang out for just a second before you head off.
Mhm.
So.